Now we are almost there. We're getting to the final bit, which will probably be a little bit of a surprise, because quite honestly, I don't know what to expect, and neither should you know what to expect. And I think also the panelists here, please come on the stage. We thought this year, let's try out a new format, and this is something we haven't tried. And let's see where it takes us. Let's test this, yeah? So grab a seat and put the mic away. And first, let's get familiar, yeah? So we have here Joao, Sami, and Adi. So I'll give you a little round of introduction to each of you.
Sure. May I start? Yeah. So,
please.
Hi everyone. My name is Joao. I'm originally from Portugal. Lived in Estonia for the past. I stopped counting, but I guess it's 15 years now. I'm not from the software testing world, so more from the product ownership and product management world. Did a lot of work with different startups here in Estonia, and now have co-founded a startup of my own, where testing is kind of fundamental, but it's not something that I do. So I don't know what perspective I'm going to bring to this panel, but let's see where it takes us.
Thanks, Joao. Sami.
Hi, Sami Söderblom from Finland. Hi. Some of you might know me already, but let's recap anyway. I'm actually a tester myself, and worked in 18 years or so in testing now. And currently I work in SOK, which is the biggest private employer in Finland, and I try to organize QA functions there and hire a lot of people, wink wink. So, I just love testing. They say that when cut, I bleed testing, so that's me in short. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Stokes from Yorkshire in the UK. I started software testing in 2003, so next year will be my 20th anniversary. I've had quite a lot of different roles all across software testing, and in the last few years I've been creating a software testing apprenticeship in partnership with the Coders Guild, and as part of that we ran the UK's first free boot camps to get people transitioning from different roles into tech. We've done 11 cohorts with, I think it's over 300 people now, and we've got about 70% success rate in getting new people into tech. And the really great thing about those courses is the way they recruit. Throughout the 11 cohorts, 50% have been people who identify as female and 50% have been BAME. So it's really getting more diversity into tech as well.
Thank you, Eddie. Amazing stuff. So a little bit of a little applause to encourage our dear panelists. Thank you. So finally, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Kaspar Loog. I'm one of the founders of Nordic Testing Days. And day-to-day life, I'm Director of Product Management at LHV, which is a bank established both here in Estonia and in the UK. So, but what's my connection to testing? I actually started off my career as a tester, then wandered back into running an IT consultancy focused on testing, and also running a startup doing visual UI testing. But for the past 5 years or so, 6 years, the only thing I hear about testing is usually at the Nordic Testing Days. So in the business, and again not. Yeah. So let's go. And I have an opening question. I will excuse Joao from it, because the question is, what do you think has changed over the last 3 years in testing? Because we've had COVID and people working from home, and a lot of things which has affected working together. So maybe I'll start off with you, Sami.
On the spot. Actually, people have started isolating themselves a bit more, doing their own stuff, like focusing on functionalities than doing it as a collaboration. And I've seen less pairing, less mobbing, and so on. And that worries me a bit because that's how we convince others that we do good work. We testers, not just, we don't poke around systems and build automation and so on. We collaborate and create value around us. And that has suffered somewhat, some bit, and we need to get back on track on that.
So do you think that actually we should drive all the testers back to the office now?
No, I'm not saying that, but we should focus on doing things together despite the distance, I think.
All right, thanks. Adi, what's your take on it?
So I got my first remote role because I was going to transfer to Leeds, and the role got taken away from me because I was due to start on the Monday of the first lockdown in the UK, and they announced it on the Wednesday, and I got a phone call on the Thursday saying that everybody in the pipeline has had job offers withdrawn. So even though I had a signed contract, I basically started the first lockdown unemployed. So I was really fortunate to get a really great company called Glean. I literally tested their remote onboarding process for them because I was the very first person that onboarded remotely because lockdown had just started. And because I started in that vein, I found collaboration worked quite well. There were some things that were missing. In getting teams together on screens isn't quite the same as getting everybody in a room and using Miro and Jamboards and stuff to do whiteboard things and things like that isn't quite the same. But we found really good ways of working. And from all the conversations that we've had, the company's quite open about wellness and well-being. So we were quite open about like what lockdown was like for people and not being able to go outside. We had those discussions, which was really good. But because everybody's been really open, everybody's approachable. So if I needed to discuss something with a designer or a developer or anybody else like that, it was a quick message on Slack. Have you got 5 minutes spare? Will I have in 10 minutes? And then you just have a conversation. And it did feel different but similar to like wandering up to somebody's desk and having a conversation. You don't get as much the bumping into each other. But we have, and I can't remember what the software was called, but you could sign up to this, have a coffee with somebody. So you just get paired with somebody random in the company. So it could literally be anybody from the CEO to anybody in any department. And you had a 15-minute chat with them. Just how are you getting on? How are you doing? What do you do? How's your work? But yeah, I've found it different, but still getting a reasonable level of collaboration and pairing and stuff like that.
So.
Yeah, can I add? I mean, I'm not from the software testing world, but I think in the last 3 years, I think the world has changed. And I think that affects a little bit how people perceive technology. And what I've seen in my travels through the world and talking to different companies is that there has been a need to do a lot of stuff from a distance, remotely. And I think that has had consequences when you look at, I was listening to the first talk today, the opening keynote, and the guy made a very good point because he scared me at one point when he was doing this sort of testing with the injection codes and all of that. And I think when people start to use technology more and start to do remote work first, then they become more aware of the need for security, for example, of the need for testing. And I think that wasn't there before so much. Maybe we just lived with some of the vulnerabilities because it was contained in the physical space of the office and it was contained within the network that we were on. But suddenly when everyone is working from home, you expose your documents, your passwords, a lot of more vulnerabilities become exposed just from the fact that people are working from home on non-secure devices, on non-secure networks. And the first wave of the pandemic, it was chaos, it was messy, but it was there. And I think in the last 3 years, a lot of security measures had to be adopted by force of the circumstances, but I think it has pushed on the security side, and I hope also on the software testing, the world a little bit closer to understanding the need for it. So yeah, that's my take. I think it has kind of pushed us a little bit more in that direction.
Well, also we noticed already before the pandemic that even in Nordic testing days, the popularity of security-related topics just rose. There were more talks on the subject, and there was a lot more attendance on the topic and requests to go deeper in that in that rabbit hole, if you can say so. But what is your feeling? Is there more focus now on security testing and that area of testing? Sami already just pitch in.
From my point of view, it does feel that there's a more focus on quality attributes in general, whether that be security, performance, accessibility, all the different sorts of ones that you can get. Because I think there's just a lot more conversations around those things. There's a lot more information available. It doesn't feel as much as a niche. Well, I'm a security tester, therefore I do security testing, and that's all I read about. When we're teaching our new students, we talk about like T and pie-shaped testers, having depth in one or more subjects. But we encourage them to be what we call broken combs. That's to have a very broad knowledge of software testing and then dive a little bit down into each one until you find the one that you want to really get into. Because without having awareness of all the different things you could possibly do, how are you going to know which one's right for you?
Yeah, I have actually similar sentiments, and also the awareness of quality attributes have expanded to developers also. When you are doing secure systems, you're building it in, not just gluing it over via testing. So yeah, I think, but it's still a bit trendy, and I'm a bit worried on that because I have this heuristic thingy that I have different quality attributes, and it has quite a lot of them, almost 60 different kinds, and security is one of them. So we need to even out the field a bit. So, yeah.
I think the broken comb aspect. I think this is one of the advantages of events like this, that give you the overview of everything that's going on, and then you can go a little bit more in detail. But is the focus on security perhaps because that's where the money is? Like that's where the pain point is?
Well, that's where the money went.
That's what I'm saying. So is that where it comes from, with the focus on the security?
I'd say one of the reasons there's a focus on security is because you've got testing conferences, and then you've got security conferences, and a lot of the other quality attributes don't have that range to bring a lot of people together, even for one day, to just talk about, say, performance. I've never seen, there are accessibility conferences out there, but they're advertised to accessibility professionals. They're not just broadly advertised. Well, I retweet it, but I don't have a lot of followers. But yeah, I think it's because like B-Sides and the big ones in America, the security conferences have been around for such a long time. People see testing and security, and that's the thing that gets the focus and the highlight, whereas all the other things that could be done just aren't necessarily there. Like I've been to developer conferences, I've been to security conferences, because I like going to places where I don't know things. I want to learn. And like you can go to a testing conference and go, well, I know quite a bit about that subject, I know quite a bit about that subject, and you might get a different view, but you have less takeaways than if you go to somewhere where you don't know much. Then you usually get more takeaways and more insights. Well, that's what I find. Mm-hmm.
Just to go on from there, I mean, there's so many like specialized conferences nowadays. I've started to think, also looking at job advertisements. So is testing still like a separate profession, or is it turning into a portfolio of skills that you're supposed to have in any case? It doesn't matter what role you're fulfilling in the IT industry or software development industry. So what do you think? Do we still like need somebody with a job contract with a staple of tester on it, or it's just another skill, and we're supposed to be cross-functional software developers who know it all and do it all? And what do you think?
If one would know all, we don't need teams. So, so we need different. I'm still advocating testing, but I use QA as a Trojan horse for it. So it gets, as a word, more respect. Okay, it means also different things, but it's easier to introduce testing to organization while you're using QA. I'm a papa bear of QA in SOK, even though I'm a tester by heart. So I have to use these kind of things.
But do you try to embed sort of the testing mindset to people who are not necessarily doing QA, or is it, I don't know, maybe needing to bring people from the outside into the organization?
Yeah, of course. And that's because we cannot, even though there's a brilliant group of people here, we cannot do it alone. We need developers, and we need designers, we need product people, and so on. And helping that, I call QA quality advocacy, and that's what we do. We facilitate discussion around quality and testing and so on. So,
yeah, and I think if you do it from that framework, then it needs to be embedded throughout the organization. Yeah. It's not just a set of skills that someone has that you bring in, but I think it needs to be kind of cross-organization quality advocacy. Yeah. Because then it breeds into the products that you're putting out to the users.
Yeah, that's why they pay me.
It's good.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, I don't feel any subjects out of bound for me to bring it up, no matter what it is. From when I first started testing, I always like to have enough information to ask questions about the things that I thought, have we thought about this enough? So, like, there's an old saying, there's no such thing as stupid questions. But if one person needs clarity, it helps them. And by explaining something to someone, you're getting more clarity yourself. So but even when I started off testing, I'd say, so what does that mean for performance? Or does that mean we're going to need a security sweep or whatever it might be? And sometimes they go, well, we might do, we haven't thought about it. Or well, I thought we'd got enough information on that, but we need more clarity. So whatever the subject is, I don't feel it's out of bounds. Melissa did a great talk earlier. One of the questions that she got at the end was, if you're asking questions about user experience, is that coming outside of your role? What would you do if somebody said to you, yeah, but that's not your job? My job's to make quality software. Just because I have a role of tester doesn't mean I should ignore something that affects quality. So I work with designers, I work with our UX people, I work with developers, I work with marketing. I've sat in on webinars that are customer facing, just because I'm bringing a different point of view and helping customers understand our product from different areas. But yeah, just because I'm called a tester doesn't mean I haven't got opinions on design and simplicity and accessibility and all those sorts of things.
Well, whenever you talk to designers, well, obviously, designers know that very well, that everybody knows something about design and obviously want to comment on that, whatever they're doing. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of that on the developers, but on the designers, everyone has an opinion, right? Everyone is qualified to make an opinion. But I think on this embedding of the testing mindset and the quality advocacy that you mentioned throughout the organization, I think there's still a long way to go, because even within my own company, we're a small startup at the moment. I have young developers, and this reminds me of my days building websites for clients, who, when there's an issue that the client is having, the first reaction, the first instinct is to say, it works on my machine. Like,
no.
Yes, right? And I mean, you're talking, junior developers, fair enough, but the mindset, you can see that it's still not there, right? And for me, it obviously makes sense, yes, we need to test, we need testers, we need quality assurance, but it needs to also come from them, that the mindset can't just be, it works in my machine. Like, it's not broken, it works in my machine, right? So I like that, I like that you need to have that throughout the entire organization, that it's not just a specific department that is responsible for quality assurance and for testing, because otherwise you outsource it, and if you outsource it, then within the organization, the responsibility is pushed somewhere else. And if the responsibility is pushed somewhere else, then it works in my machine. Then I don't have to worry about it because someone else is dealing with it. But when you can't do that, and trust me, we can't do that because we're too small, then the responsibility needs to fall on the shoulders of the people who are building it and who are building something for clients. And fair enough, there might not be the client-facing people, but the mindset needs to be better than it works in my machine. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I like that you started talking about mindset. I just recently wrote a thing that about how three different mindsets would approach a testing problem. Developer, I used developer, QA engineer, and me. Developer wants to implement a solution to a problem and make it efficient, and perhaps put some tests in place so that it doesn't regress and so on. So all very good, all very professional. QA engineer enriches that, creates more diverse test suites and goes deeper into topics and uses the knowledge that is there. But what I do, I call into service all the means to break it. So, not just break it, but resurface the problems in it. And I work really hard to do that. I try to introduce scenarios where it doesn't work, so that we can start fixing them. And there's a lot I have accumulated during these 18 years to support that. And those are some, and when you combine those, it becomes really strong. And yeah.
I'm sorry to jump in. I from having worked with large corporates and now going to having my own startup. When I hear this, I'm like, yes, this is exactly the type of thing that would make something kind of foolproof in a way. But also, I think from the speed of deploying new things to the ground, wouldn't it slow us down too much? The last bit. Are you testing? Because aren't you then just implementing something that is, going out to all the edge cases where only 1% or less than that of the users would ever see it?
I don't have to limit my services to, for instance, version control. There can be automated sets that we can update and enrich and so on. So they maintain the flow that is important in modern software development. I can study the system and bring up new information, and other people can decide whether they can grasp it, whether they can do something about it. It can involve processes, communication systems, it can involve people, and so on. So I just introduce information, and people decide whether it messes up with their flow or improves things. So yeah.
Makes sense.
In the end, the joke goes that it doesn't matter. I mean, in the end, who will find the bug? I mean, it's your choice whether it's you or the client. Exactly. So we started talking about a little bit, junior developers and not yet having the right mindset. On the other hand, just the previous talk in this very hall was about teaching kids to test software. And that actually, taking it forward, first question. Now, Joao, you're basically running a small software development company. So if quality was your goal, what would be the title for the job ad be, in your eyes? Would it be a software engineer? Would it be a quality assurance specialist? What would it be? How would you frame it? That ties to the previous.
That's a good question. I think that for the dimension we have at the moment, definitely the software engineer would have to have that mindset already. So I probably wouldn't put a specific role category for it. If I would put it, then I would broaden the scope, not just to deal with the technical aspect of the quality, but also because we deal with we deal with electronic signatures. There's a ton of compliance issues. So not just from the technical point of view, but the legal point of view. So something around compliance assurance, which is beyond just the technical aspects of whether something breaks or doesn't break on the technical aspect, but are we meeting the requirements of what is expected from us from the clients and from the legal side? So I'd probably call on that. And just to touch that to the previous talk of the children's book, which, by the way, I'm definitely going to buy a copy because I looked it up on Amazon and the delivery fees are 20 euros. So I hope we have some copies here for...
I can bring it to you cheaper.
Okay. Yeah. But I don't think that it's... I love the talk. I don't think it is too early to start talking to kids about it. So I think this, we were chatting before in the break about curiosity as a trait in kids. So definitely, if I'm hiring someone from my organization to poke holes, right? I think one of the traits that I'm going to be looking out for is curiosity. And I do think kids have an innate sort of curiosity built into them. And I was just trying to, during that break in the discussion, to talk about how perhaps in my generation, whenever I got a radio-controlled car or whatever it was, I would poke it, I would tear it apart, take the engine, build a fan, whatever it was. And I see less of that in today's toys. They're harder to take apart, they're harder to dismantle, they're harder to play with in the gadgets, in the electronics. And of course we have Arduinos and we have Raspberry Pis, and it just feels like we've commercialized, messing around with technology, which is fine, there's a market for it, obviously. But I see that, and I have two kids, and I see that they act as sort of passive consumers of it, rather than playing an active role in shaping how the entertainment is played. I don't know if you guys relate to that at all.
But jumping ahead from kids to hiring testers or getting testers abroad, what do you think, Sami and Lady, what would be the minimum entry criteria to be a tester?
Well, we say, because we're taking people who might not have heard of software testing, when we're teaching them either through an apprenticeship or through the boot camps that we run, we have the attitude that if you bring the curiosity and the interest, we can teach you the skills. So we basically go through what is tested. So we explain that it's very hard, it's risk analysis, and it's understanding the risks we bring to the activity because of our own internal biases and assumptions that we make on every single day. Everybody makes tons of assumptions and has tons of biases, and there's a spectrum about how aware you are of those sorts of things. But we teach them what is quality, how to think like a tester, and we talk so much about curiosity. And we talk about quality as a whole team activity. So we don't talk about testers versus developers per se, but we do talk about the different mindsets that those two things have, where a developer's primary objective is creation and creating something that works, and a tester's primary objective is to interrogate and identify risks and find those circumstances where it won't work. And we also try and teach them that ego can't be part of software development, because if you have really strong opinions that are strongly held, you're not going to argue about changes. But if you have really strong opinions that are weakly held, then you're open to conversations and you're open to gaining new information, and that makes you aware of so much more. And it also helps you be able to talk about so much more and open other people's eyes about things that might be wrong. Then you can go through all that and find a really interesting edge case bug. And then you're going into the realms of, right, we found the risk, what's the likelihood of it happening? Like I say, it might be 1%, but what's the impact? Well, it could bring a server down. So then you've got the balance of, well, yeah, we can put it on the backlog, but it better not be there too long, because if that server goes down, we're going to lose £1 million a day, or whatever it might be. But yeah, likelihood and impact is everything to do with what you found. And like I say, explaining risks in that way, there's no ego about it. Like I say, I've found this really, really interesting thing. I think the impact is going to be traumatic for our company, but it's your decision to fix it.
So, Sami, what do you need to call somebody a tester? Yeah.
Well, I started thinking about boundaries. Like, what do kids do when they try stuff out? Like the radio-controlled automobiles and parents' nerves and such. So I have two small kids myself, and they often well, one example is they do it like soccer players often do. They fall down and look behind the fingers whether I saw it or not. So how loud they will scream and so on. So they test the boundaries of my control over them. They test the boundaries of equipment. They find all these. They are mapping the world as they are driven by the curiosity. And when you do that in a professional fashion, you start to define what makes a tester as a professional tester. When you recognize a boundary and you go over that, you are exploring. And that's a professional activity that can be enhanced and studied. And that's for me, it's a science. And I give everything to it. I'm an exploratory tester. And so for some, it's like this guy is ad hoc tester. No. I try to recognize boundaries and go over them in a controlled fashion. So that would be how I start to define kid versus professional tester.
That's a good job ad. We're looking for explorers. I like that.
Well, yeah, I'm sure the risk and reward are well balanced there, aren't they? So let's a little bit go more in the hype era. Yeah. So I think 10 years ago when we started up Nordic Testing Days, we had a lot of hype around automation tools, and basically the promise and premise was that all testing is going to be automated. So here we are, 10 years later. So where are we at really? I mean, are you able to compare how we did things from 10 years ago compared to how we typically do things right now in the context of testing, software testing? Maybe Adi, start.
Yeah, so the company I work at, Glean, we have very much a DevOps culture. So we have very broad automation, everything from visual tests to unit tests and all the way through integration end to end. We have tests around performance, all sorts of different things. So we have a really good pipeline. And when we commit PRs in, if it passes all the pipeline, it gets put live. So we release several times a day. We're not quite Facebook doing hundreds and hundreds, but we do release several times a day. And we have a set of exploratory testers that sit alongside that, and nothing's out of bound for that exploratory testing. We don't sort of have a Kanban board where there's a separate column for test. So as soon as a developer starts working on a PR, we'll start talking to them about what they're doing, what they're thinking about. We'll do that sort of pairing and have discussions. And then while they carry on doing that, we'll be coming up with different scenarios and different things we do. What do we need to regress? And again, using an analogy from us teaching software testing, this originally came from Bruce the Legend on Twitter. They said that everybody can draw, and we had an example in the last talk of everybody drawing knights, and there was various levels of skill on display throughout the whole thing. So everybody can test. But if you want to be a professional artist, you have to practice. You have to practice multiple techniques. It takes thousands of hours of practice using different tools and different mediums. And it's exactly the same for a software tester. There's loads of techniques you have to learn. There's multiple ways of doing exploratory testing. And we have a session that's purely devoted to exploratory testing. And we get them to do some exploratory testing within like the first 10 minutes. And then we get them to repeat the exercise once we've taught them about session-based testing, how to have a focus, how to have a mission, how to put extra things they've seen to one side so they can come back and look at that later. And the difference that you see in the quality of the results that they find in the testing, literally 10 minutes testing at the beginning without any instructions and 10-minute testing at the end, the results are quite staggering because they've seen the value of the focus and having an intent and doing things with a purpose. And when you were talking about having a job description where you're wanting explorers, that's pretty much the job description we have at our company. The job role is exploratory tester. And we don't have a massive list of you need every skill in testing. We say things like, we know you will bring different skills like some automation, some exploratory testing, some API testing, whatever it might be. But it's more about the mindset of exploration and exploring and finding risks and taking different courses through the software than it is about, all right, you need loads of technical skills and then be able to talk a bit about testing as well.
Yeah, I work in a company that has, parts of it has like that, but they still haven't found the glory of exploration yet. I'm about to, I'm working on it, but yeah, definitely. And what has changed, we are challenged more often. for instance, in DevOps. I have a lot of colleagues that question my existence as a tester. So I just have to work on it and produce value. So and that happens exactly like that. I want to. Are you opening a branch in Finland or?
No, but you can talk to me on Twitter. I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, cool. But we are on the road of that people understand the value of exploration. We have to, a lot of developers have to relearn the value of exploration and so on, so that it's not just a deterministic pushing towards deadlines and so on, but we have to also map out the software and boundaries of it and so on. So if I look at 10 years back, the pace was a bit slower. Now we are releasing many times a day into production, and people think that there's no room for exploration in that context, but there is. We can always produce information regardless of the pace and so on. So I don't actually know what has been changed. Perhaps attitudes, and we just have to work to fix them, and that's what I try to do.
So what I dig out from what you just described, it seems that when maybe 10 years ago or even more, testing was like in a waterfally way, one like bus stop before the release bus arrives to the destination. But now it seems that the testing activities are more about, the bus is running and you're just running along with it and just tightening some screws here and there and changing wheels out, and so it's more like not even like Formula One pit stop, but it's literally working on a running car. So is my impression correct?
Yeah, I think the term you're looking for is gatekeepers. I think 10 years ago, especially because of waterfall methodologies, I think testers were very much seen as gatekeepers because all the development's been done. Why are you finding problems? Well, you haven't let us look up to now. And because testers are very much ingrained in teams now, testing is part of the software development process. It's not an addition, it's not an add-on, it's not something that comes afterwards. You can use terms like shift left or shift in or whatever you want to call it, but being involved at the beginning of the project and asking questions about, how are we going to handle this scenario, that could save 5 bugs, 10 bugs, 1 bug. It might not save any bugs, but it makes people think about things earlier in the process. And I love quotes, and I like the quote that Einstein said, that you can't solve problems with the same kind of thinking that introduced them. And I think that's why developers and testers work so well in pairs when they have conversations around how software is going to be developed, because we're both coming at it from a different mindset. It's the creator and the critique. And I always say, as software testers, our primary function is to critique software, not to criticize, but to critique. And the best critiques you can get improve the quality of it. And yes, everybody has users tested in live, but you don't really want them to find the really obvious ones that you should find throughout the development process. You want them to find the edge cases that have the lesser impact, or the ones that go, well, I found this really tricky, so we can improve a flow or move something around or whatever it is. But yeah, being critiques of software, we also have to think about ego. That's why I always teach. Ego's got no place in software testing. It works on my machine. Oh, that's brilliant when you're shipping it to the customer. So when you say it works on your machine, is that a local build, or is that production ready, or is that pre-production? So is it not the same environment then? All right, okay, just clarifying.
But I don't think you would have gotten to the place where you are now with several releases a day without some level of automation in testing, right?
No.
So I think for the last 10 years there has been an improvement. I remember it probably wasn't 10 years ago, but I remember we were having a conversation when you were working for your previous company. I was working for my digital agency, and I think we were trying to see how we could use your software to test out websites built and then rendered in different devices and different browsers and everything. And back then, we had one guy who was doing the development, and if he was lucky, he had a couple of different OSs and different browsers open, and he would do it. And when you were introduced, and I like, this is definitely something we should have, like it should be part of it. So I think in the last 10 years, there has been an evolution. I know how much automation is there, but if you're able to do several releases a day, there has to be a lot of stuff that is automated. And I often talk when I do trainings to some of the corporates in Agile and the mindset as well, that, back in the day you had Windows, one version from Windows to the next version, and all the users suddenly had to be retrained on how to use the next version of Windows, right? And if you look at your phones now, and I ask you when was the last time that your Facebook app was updated, you don't know. Maybe, right? You don't know when was the last time, right? So it just shows you the resilience of how these things work. Yeah.
But don't worry, Facebook knows.
Facebook for sure knows. Facebook knows a lot more than just that, yeah.
I had a thought on that, the automation part. It has freed us to do what we should do, because it's expanded and it has improved, and it has expanded to all these areas that we couldn't think that was possible. That when you can define it, you can automate it, and the rest you can explore. It reminds me of a moment in Finnish history when there was this Sampo harvester that was used to gather the crops. It was basically automating the farming. So everyone thought that, oh no, it's taking our jobs. But it freed people to go to schools and do other stuff than farming. So, and it had huge impact on our rise as a culture and as a community. So yeah.
So now we have all this bright future because, obviously I understand we have now automated testing and we are able, all free to do all this other interesting stuff we haven't been able to automate yet. So what do you think are the new frontiers in testing? What is the next, I don't know if it's the big thing or the more like the special thing that is up and coming? These are the topics that are not on the big stage today, but they will be like in 3 to 5 years. What is your thought?
Well, I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah,
I have no idea. That's why we... Well, there's a few trends going on. AI is definitely one of them. Hua was doing an excellent workshop on AI today. Unfortunately, I had to leave Hua. Thanks, Hua, for running that. But that's definitely one of them, AI, machine learning, and all these kind of... but it helps on automation. But we might have to relearn a few things. For instance, performance engineering. It surprises me how people have forgotten that. Previously, it has been done like actually building in performance into. Now it comes through later on when we find performance bottlenecks and so on. So all this, we might have to do a lot of relearning while automation lets us to think a bit. And but yeah, and also DevOps. Well, whatever that may be, testing. DevOps has helped me to expand testing from just computer systems to whole other levels, ideas, designs, and so on. So we need to do that more, expand testing to places where it hasn't been before. So, but that's my opinion on things. It's not necessarily a trend.
All right, Eddie.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm really excited about what AI can bring as a tool to help improve automation and improve what's going on in the background, those things that free us up. I think when we talked about 10 years ago, testing was dead. That's like literally the reason why I did my first technical talk, because the testing is dead, we can do 100% automation was going round. And I literally had to stand up in front of a crowd of developers and stand up for testing, which is why I got into talking about it. But I think there's a much broader understanding these days that the 100% automation thing's a myth, and it always will be, because to get 100% automation, you need to stop developing software. So you literally need to not write another line of code until you've got 100% automation. that's the only way you're ever going to keep up with it, because software develops much faster than the tools to do automation, and there's so much variance of things you can do. I mean, we have fantastic tools out there. You can automate using Postman and do all the API testing. You've got visual testing, cross-browser. You can have like thousands of browsers and operating systems combinations out there, and you've still not covered everything, because that's one combination of stuff. You're not combining it with screen sizes, whether you're in sunlight, what other apps you've got on the phone that might be pulling memory, you know, how much battery you've got left, because these are all plugged in all the time. So you're talking 100% battery. So there's so many things that enhance our testing and give us feedback. But if automation never fails, does it have value? So it's like Schrodinger's backup. If you take a backup of your system every single day and never check it, is it a backup or is it not a backup? But yeah, I'm really excited to see what it can bring. We're already seeing things like AI crawlers going through systems and mapping screens and showing us lots of different stuff. And that to me is really fascinating. But then you look at the real heart of it, and you've got a system going, that's a cat, that's not a cat, that's a cat, and that's not a cat, and it takes 10,000 hours to work out that's a cat. But then you start with a brown cat and a white cat and a happy cat and a jumping cat, and it's like, it's going to take a long time for this to catch up. And then you see the other side of AI. They had an AI bot that was taught by Twitter to tweet, and it became sort of racist and misogynistic within 24 hours, so that project's never been seen again. So I think there'll be a lot of good come out of it. I think there'll be a lot of stumbling blocks, and I think there'll be a lot of, to borrow a phrase that's been very popular over the last 4 years, fake news. Just like 100% automation was fake news back in the day, like AI is going to take over testing is fake news, because no matter what technology you have, and no matter how complex it becomes, it's never going to have proper emotions, it's never going to have proper feelings, and our relationship with software is very much emotional. Software can make you happy, it can make you sad, it can make you frustrated, it can make you want to throw it against the wall. It definitely can make you cry. Now, let's be honest, everybody's been there. Now, not necessarily at work, but at some point. But we have an emotional connection with software, we always will have, and you're never going to replicate that with any sort of automation, AI, whatever comes next. But I'm really fascinated to see how it can enhance software and make us think about it differently. So I'm sure there's testing, and testing's such a broad subject. I'm sure there's things that we've never thought of yet. There's unknown unknowns out there that are just waiting to be uncovered, and it's going to be a step change or an accident that's going to uncover it, just like every other great discovery in the world. It's either an accident or it's a step change.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to bring a different perspective here in terms of the next frontiers of testing. I think you guys covered the AI aspect quite well. I think it's an old cliche to say that, you know, software is eating the world. And we see that software is present in more and more places where you don't think that software would be present. You know, fridges, whatever, right? So what I'd like to see, or what I think would be interesting to explore, is the security aspect, but not from a cybersecurity point of view, but from the point of view of if you're an engineer, you know, and I'm talking from knowledge, because I studied engineering in Portugal, and there's a code of conduct, and you belong to a professional order, and if you build a bridge and the bridge collapses, there's liability, and there's, you know, a pointing of responsibilities to the engineers that designed and built and manufactured the bridge, right? And in the software engineering, I don't think we're there yet. And I think testing and the awareness of testing is going to increase. And I think because software is embedded and will continue to be embedded in many, many aspects, like software is eating the world. So it's going to be in bridges, you know, it's going to be in planes that fly themselves, which they already do. It's going to be in cars, it's going to be everywhere, right? So I think the point of assigning blame or responsibility when things fail and the software is to blame, I think that's going to be something that will highlight the need for testing. And it's going to increase the demand for software testing to the point of liability. You know, so I think we need to professionalize the software engineering aspect, also to elevate it to the level of, you know, doctors, to the level of architects and engineers, and I think this is where I'd like to see it going.
Yeah, speaking of software is eating the world. So last week I bought a bike, and first time I kind of configured it, and since it
configured it, what is that? How do you configure a bike?
Exactly. So you open up an app and you connect all the shifters of the bike to the.
Oh my God, I'm getting too old for this.
And then it asks you, well, do you want to do a firmware update? It's like software update on a bike. And this is where we are at the moment, yeah?
Right. So imagine you're riding your bike, doing your whatever fast run. Something goes wrong, and the software, for some reason, is to blame for it. You end up in the hospital. Where's the liability aspect?
Well, luckily, the brakes are still mechanical.
All right.
So far.
Hey Siri, please brake.
For now.
A fly-by-wires bike.
Yeah, but if you just take it one step further, red team, black hat type of stuff, and then you figure out a little widget or a device that can help shift everybody else's gear to the wrong one in a peloton. So that can be fun, yeah. So next Tour de France, look out. Yeah. But we're now getting more to the, let's say, physical world, and software is eating the world. That means the role of quality and testing is ever more important. So what I've noticed over the last couple of years now is that the takes on how testing safety is approached by different companies is very, very different. So on one extreme, you can take, say, Tesla, which basically is rolling out software updates on 2-ton moving objects going on public roads, and software is called autopilot. And look, ma, no hands. Update just landed yesterday, and I'm a beta tester. Yeah, so.
Not just you and everyone else on the road. Unwillingly.
And that includes everyone else.
Unwillingly testers.
At least if you own the Tesla and you're sitting inside it, at least you're supposed to be protected by it, but everybody around it are not. And on the other extreme, you've got the Boeing 737 MAX incident, where essentially the whole fleet was grounded because of, you can say, software designed on the premise of incorrect assumptions, where it was assumed that there are two sensors, where in fact there was actually one sensor determining the angle of the plane. And in aviation, the attitude is completely different, even though in my eyes, same thing. It doesn't matter if it's a car or a plane. And it seems that both industries are on the extreme ends of the spectrum. So where do you think is the correct place for it?
I don't think it's an industry difference, although perhaps aviation is slightly more on the
it's more regulated.
It's more regulated, so it's perhaps more on the conservative side. But I don't think it's an industry difference. I think it's Tesla having a move fast, break things approach.
And people.
Yeah, perhaps, but I mean, they have embedded in them the whole startup ethos of releasing often and whatnot, and Boeing clearly doesn't. So if there is a aviation startup out there that wants to do planes with software and release often their updates, I'm sure they're doing it at the moment.
To be honest, actually, this difference is existing already, which is SpaceX versus Boeing, both developing flying to the moon capsules, right?
That's it, right? Yeah. So I think this is the correct analogy, right? So if you look at SpaceX and how they're approaching the innovation of the technology and the space, and the learning from failures, they do fail. Their rockets often do fail. That would be a more apt approach. And if you look at on the car side, you have Tesla, and perhaps you have other car manufacturers who are more conservative about their release things. And I think this touches back on what I was talking about before, the need for this professional conduct on the software side of things that touches the hardware and has tremendous impact. So I'm okay if we err on the side of caution. I think we are moving fast, which is good. perhaps moving a little bit too fast. So I don't mind if Tesla is a little bit more careful with how they release their updates. But then again, I think pinging back to what Adi was saying before, that you need to calculate the impact of the, and the probability of these things happening. And it's not always easy, I assume.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about self-driving cars and things like that, you only have to look at the big car show in Las Vegas. They had 3-day tested outside this massive show of all these different radar technologies. There's something like 30 different companies with different radar technologies, and the simple test was you drive at 30 miles an hour, and they pulled a cardboard cutout of a child or a person in front of them, in front of the car, and they had something like a 23% success rate in stopping, and that was across multiple electric vehicles and multiple radar technologies. But without all those different people and all those different companies and all those different cars trying to find solutions, we wouldn't move forward as a technology society. There's always somebody who goes first, and because somebody goes first, there's always somebody who fails first. And quite often it's not the person who fails first who puts two and two together and comes up with the solution. It's somebody with their idea combines it. And like I say, it's those sea changes or those happy coincidences that makes the leaps forward.
Yeah, but I mean, Adi, but then again, I'd rather be the testers within the company to find those bugs than the users while they're doing the self-driving and finding those bugs. And I think it is somewhere it's written that the safety regulations are written in blood, and perhaps this is one of those industries where I would be more on the side of, yes, we need to have all the way up to the guy who does the making sure that the bugs are found within the company than the users finding those bugs.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the most publicised Tesla crashes of the last 2 or 3 years was the couple who bought a Tesla, drove it home from the thing, and next day they said, we're going to try the autopilot. So they got in the back seat and drove down the road, and it went into a tree after about 15 miles. Now, this is why you always need humans testing software, because they're going to come up with things that people will never do. Because never is like next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's always this saying, read the manual. So actually, I think the name for autopilot actually came from aviation industry. And in the aviation industry, autopilot means assisted flying. So the plane does most of the job, but you need to be alert and look at all the gauges and outside preferably as well. Sami, you have anything to pitch in?
I rather dodge this question because there's a reason why I wear mechanical watches. I don't trust anything that has zeros and ones in it.
Well, I think the first computers were mechanical as well, so weren't they?
Yeah. I might go, as an old man, I could be the kind of guy who uses mechanical computers and hisses at the software and whatnot, but let's go, they're not there yet.
Well, that's why we have bugs, isn't it? Because the first bug was an actual moth being caught in a mechanical computer on one of those computing cards. And it's actually documented in the Smithsonian Museum in America. The first software bug was an actual bug. It was a moth.
So on that note, I think it's a very good final say on this little panel. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all to the panelists.
Thank you.
So let me now reach my notes. I'm trying to find out what I'm supposed to say next, and it's not an easy thing given the software I have. But anyway, I'll speak by heart. So, I think there should be a funny guy coming up here, much more funny than I am, coming up here, and a little bit of entertainment. So, thank you guys. Let's free the stage.